I have a confession to make. I may have been wrong about inflation. I just discovered some new information that I'm going to reveal to you today, right now, that has me second guessing the prediction that I made several months ago that we would see disinflation in Q3 or Q4. I'm going to explain this to you in one simple, fast step today. Let's start with going over consumer purchasing power. Now, we know why we've had inflation over the past couple years, because the central planners increased demand while they decreased supply. It is no surprise that in this type of environment where demand is increasing and supply is decreasing, that we have consumer prices going to infinity and beyond.
To infinity and beyond!
And we've seen this recently with the CPI print going up to 9.1%, the highest CPI we have seen since the early 1980s. And a quick way to understand which policies created this environment of inflation, all you have to do is go back to 2019. And just imagine a world where going into 2020, we never would have had the government's response to the cerveza sickness. Would the CPI be at 9.1% today? I don't think so. So what changed? What were the variables? Well, increasing purchasing power through stimmy checks, decreasing the expenses of the average American, while at the same time destroying supply chains. And this takes us to the first chart that I want to go over, going all the way back to 2019 to today's date. This tells us the median checking account in the United States and what percentage has it gone up since 2019, or prior to the stimmy checks, prior to the government reducing the expenses of the average American, increasing demand. On the left, we go from 0% up to 150%. This blue line represents the bottom 25% as far as income brackets. The green line represents the top 25%. On the original chart, they've got a few more income groups, but for this example, we'll just focus on the bottom 25%, the top 25%. So going back to 2019, we start at 0% increase in their checking accounts, and then it goes completely parabolic. In fact, the bottom 25% after the first round of stimmy checks got up over 100% of what they had in their checking account just going back to 2019. Think about what that did for aggregate demand. And at the top 25%, their checking account balance went up by almost 50%. But you can see the volatility, especially at the bottom 25%, as the group got more and more and then spent their stimmy checks. First round of stimmies, spend. Second round of stimmies, woohoo, go to Louis Vuitton, spend. Next round of stimmies, all right, let's go to Vegas. And it just gradually goes down and down and down, where the top 25% haven't really needed to draw on that savings. Therefore, it's more of a flat line. But let's fast forward to today, and we can see that the bottom 25% group still has about 75% more in their checking account than they did in 2019. The top 25% has about, let's just say about 25% more in their checking account. This is what I didn't realize. And I just found this out reading a Wall Street Journal article yesterday. I thought that pretty much all of the stimmy checks and the savings that had accrued from the stimmy checks, so the PPP or the reduction in expenses, we'll get to that in a moment. I thought all of that pretty much wore off in 2021, but I didn't realize that that aggregate demand still exists to a massive degree. In fact, in that same Wall Street Journal article, Jamie Dimon says that this, we'll call it Stimmy Power has another 6 to 9 months left, meaning that this additional purchasing power or additional aggregate demand will be in the system for several more months. And again, what I got wrong is I thought this additional purchasing power pretty much expired back in 2021. But that's not the only thing I got wrong. Oh, no. I also got the expense side of the equation. I understood that back in 2020 and into 2021 that the student loan payments were put on hold through the CARES Act. I also understood there was a mortgage forbearance where people could apply to have their mortgage payments put on hold, just like the student loan payments. What I didn't realize is people are still on these programs. In fact, the students don't have to start paying back their loans until September of 2022. And of course, this is right around election time. So what do you think the politicians are going to do to buy votes? They're either going to forgive the debt or they're going to increase the time where these students don't have to pay back the loan, making sure that they have additional purchasing power that they wouldn't otherwise have. And when you get into the details of what's happening with the mortgage forbearance behind the scenes, it gets even more shocking. Editor, cut to the internet. This is a July 18th article from HousingWire.com. They say borrowers continue to exit forbearance, but at a much slower pace than 6 or 9 months ago, said Marina Walsh, Vice President of Industry Analysis at the Trade Group. New forbearance requests, and this is something I had no clue was even a thing, are still trickling in as permitted under the CARES Act, resulting in very little movement in the overall percentage of loans in forbearance. So not only do consumers have a lot more purchasing power than I thought, they also have far fewer expenses. They're still not having to pay back their student loans, and they can still apply for mortgage forbearance. It's not that we still have a large amount of borrowers that aren't paying their mortgages. You still have the opportunity to apply for new forbearance. And let's keep in mind that the unemployment rate is at 3.6%. And we still have these programs in place. Absolute insanity. But let's think this through just a little bit further. You guys know from watching my videos, it's all about nuance, and the devil is in the details. And it's never just about inflation or just about deflation. We have these deflationary and inflationary pressures at play all the time. It's just a matter of which force is overwhelming the other. So we talked about all these inflationary pressures that we will most likely have at least for the next couple quarters. But let's think through what's happening on the deflation side of the equation. Insert everyone's favorite, Moody the Millennial. That's right. And Moody, back in 2019, had $100 in their checking account. All right. So Moody gets all these stimmy checks, so the balance in their checking account goes up and up and up, but then they see all of their friends on Instagram going on trips, so they start to spend down the money, but then they get another round of stimmy checks, and the whole process goes up and down and up and down. And this takes us right into what I am referring to as MERP. Oh yes, this is the Moody Millennial emotional roller coaster of purchasing power. So Moody is on the MERP ride at Disneyland, where their purchasing power is going up and down and up and down. But now we're at a point where there are no more stimmy checks. And even though Moody has more in their checking account than they did in 2019, say $100 here, $175 here, their purchasing power is still the same. And let's take it to the next step. And why? Because inflation has come up. The prices of the stuff they buy has gone up, so they have to have more in their checking account to buy the stuff they need. Now, I'm not saying that inflation has gone up to this degree. I'm just using this as an example for the thought experiment. But let's take it to the next step and remember that real wages have come down. So although Moody may be making a little bit more at Starbucks, it doesn't really matter because the price of the stuff they buy daily has gone up to a greater degree. What does this mean? This means that eventually, into the future, Moody will have to dip more and more and more into their savings and spend more and more and more from their checking account. So what ends up happening is at a certain point, Moody has zero in their checking account, and they're far worse off than before they got the stimmy checks in the first place. This is the magic, if you will, of consumer price inflation. People feel like they're getting rich at the beginning, but at the end, as these currency units flush through the system, they're getting poorer. Their standard of living has declined. And this takes us right back up to our original question: what's going to happen with demand and supply? So my whole point here with this video is to say, hey, I didn't understand the dynamics at play with stimmy power and the expenses. So I've readjusted my prediction. I'm going to say that we will get disinflation at some time, but I was predicting maybe Q3, Q4. Now I'm pushing that out to maybe Q4 or Q1 of 2023. But then we have to think through, what will the economy and the political environment look like then? If we do go into a recession, are we going to get just more of the same, even if the CPI is above their 2% target rate? Let's say we get that disinflation in Q1 of 2023, and the CPI goes from, let's say, 9, 10% down to 5%. Okay, does this give the politicians and the central planners political cover to go ahead and start the next round of buying votes, which we know will increase demand and decrease supply, just like they did in 2020 and 2021, taking us to the next wave of consumer price inflation, just like we saw during the 1970s and the 1940s, where inflation went really high, came back down, and then came right back up again. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here. I will see you on the next video.